In this watercolor tutorial, we are going to use these materials to paint an easy watercolor cactus. So first, on my 100% cotton Arches watercolor paper, I am going to paint the outline of the cactus, of the main body of the cactus, in a very, very light value Hooker's green. So light value means that I have a lot of water in the pigment. With watercolor, the way that you make it lighter is by adding a lot of water to it, and that disperses the pigment so that you can see more of the white paper underneath. And so we are going to paint the main body of the cactus, and then while that cactus is still wet, we're going to paint the two little arms off to the side. Painting the arms off to the side of the cactus while the cactus is still wet is going to ensure that there are no dried paint lines, so that the arms of the cactus blend in with the body seamlessly so that it's all one cactus, and both the arms and the main body are going to be in that light value Hooker's green. Then while all of the cactus is still wet, I'm picking up some Prussian green, which is a darker green, and using a fairly pigmented brush full of Prussian green, so not so watery as the main body, I'm going to start shading the cactus by putting the Prussian green on the left side of both arms and the main body of the cactus. And using the wet on wet technique is going to allow the pigment to blend in seamlessly with the rest of the cactus. The wet on wet technique is perfect for creating blends like this, and especially for creating shading on watercolor pieces, because the water allows the color to blend in with the rest of the piece without any dried paint lines and without a whole lot of work on your end. So as I'm shading this cactus, it's going to be kind of a back and forth between adding pigment, and then I wash off my paintbrush, and using just clean water, I continue to brush the pigment and blend it in with the rest of the cactus. This only works if the whole cactus is wet the whole time. So sometimes I have to re-wet and make sure that all of the cactus is wet while I'm still trying to do this. The other part of shading is making sure that the other side of the cactus, so the right side of the cactus, is light. And the way that we do that, instead of adding a lighter watercolor paint, is by using a clean brush to push the pigment away from it. So we're gonna look at that a little bit more in a minute. But as you can see, I'm now adding a darker color on the side that's shaded. This is a phthalo turquoise on top of the Prussian green. And it's also a good technique when you're shading to keep adding the pigment. And as long as you add the pigment on all along the left side of the cactus, along the edges of the left side of the cactus, then it will blend in pretty smoothly. I'm also adding in some more light value Hooker's green because adding the phthalo turquoise made the cactus just a little too turquoise. This is not supposed to be like a super realistic cactus. It's okay if obviously it's blue, or you can make it whatever color you want, but I added a little bit more green. But the key to that is I added the green either along the middle or off to the side, and that's so that I could maintain the balance of shading that I'm trying to do, where the left side of the cactus is the darkest part and the right side of the cactus is the lightest part. Maintaining that balance and kind of creating like a subtle gradient from dark to light on the cactus is going to help make it have dimension and depth. It kind of makes it look rounded and shows where, if this were in real life and maybe the sun was shining on the cactus on the right side and putting the left in shadow. So going back and forth between adding dark pigment to one side and then using a clean brush to add either water or light value pigment on the other side is going to create that nice loose watercolor shaded effect. So as you can see, I then dried my cactus. I have a hand embosser on my desk, and it's just a heat tool that's usually used for embossing, but I use it to dry my watercolor layers. And now I'm going to paint a flower just right on top of the cactus. And to create this flower, honestly, it's mostly just putting like a few layers of blobs on top of each other and leaving white space in between some of them. I used Quin Rose and also a little bit of yellow there to make kind of a shifting pink to orange color to, capture that desert color palette. So once I have my flower, then I'm going to take some white gouache, and the white gouache that I'm using is Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White. And with the white gouache, we're going to paint needles along the cactus. So gouache is thicker, and often when I use gouache, I will dilute it with just a little bit of water, especially if I'm trying to get really, really thin lines like I am with the needles on this cactus. So I'm also using a small detail brush. It's a size 0. And then all along the body and the arms of this cactus, I am painting needles in clumps of 3. So it's almost like it looks like a little critter footprint or something, but I'm painting 3 needles that all join together to a point at the bottom, and they're flaring out. And that is the pattern that I'm using for these needles. And I'm just going to paint the needles all over the cactus. There are a lot of different ways to paint a cactus, and if you want to look like have a reference photo, then you might be painting it differently from how this tutorial portrays. But that's why this is mostly just like a doodle of a cactus. It's not supposed to be super realistic, mostly just to make a cute and fun likeness of what a cactus looks like in real life. So I just painted a bunch of needles. I mentioned that because we're not painting lines, we're not trying to capture sections of the cactus or anything, we're just painting the cactus and the needles. And so I have some white lines there, and then I'm going to take a dark color, either a lamp black or a Payne's gray that's very pigmented. And I'm just going to add even more depth to the needles by adding a few black lines there. It's not supposed to be like there are white needles and black needles. It's more like the dark needles are adding shadow or depth to the white needles. But because this is a loose watercolor doodle, it's really okay if I'm just painting, the way that I'm trying to capture that depth is just painting some of those dark needles where the light ones are. And like I said, it doesn't have to be super realistic. I just think that this style looks really fun and cool. So that's mostly why I did that there. Finally, to add one last touch to this painting, I am adding some hand lettering. And I'm just, in my modern calligraphy style, I'm adding the phrase, "Don't be a prick," as a play on words off of the needles on the cactus, which can prick you if you touch them. I'm sure I don't have to explain why the pun there, but I did anyway. So with the thing with hand lettering and doing it with a paintbrush is you need to make sure that your paint is very liquidy. So as I'm using the well on my palette there, before I mixed in a lot of water with the well, because if your paint is too thick and you try to do hand lettering with a paintbrush with too thick paint, it's not going to be smooth, and it's going to be tricky to get the thin hairlines that you want to make it look like it's calligraphy. So That's my trick with working with watercolor in a pan when you're trying to do calligraphy, is to make it your own well of liquid watercolor almost, but not too much water because otherwise it's going to make the paint light, but just enough so that it is liquidy enough to be smooth. And there you go. Thank you so much for painting with me. I hope that you learned a lot and had a good time. If you enjoyed this tutorial and want to see more, please hit that subscribe button and feel free to leave any suggestions in the comments below. Thanks so much.